I didn't have a childhood. That's how my childhood was. I grew up carrying a lot of experiences that children shouldn't have to carry. For a long time, silence felt like survival. But eventually, I realized that silence was also keeping me from healing. That's when storytelling became my way forward. My childhood taught me how to be transactional as opposed to giving and receiving from a loving space or from a normal space. TD Jake says as well. Jake says, we are 10-gallon people born into pint sized families. Pint sized people only know how to give you pint sized love because that's all they got. I need to turn my trauma into a superpower. I need to become alchemized by what I've been through.
Hi, I'm Sonia Hollins, and thanks for tuning in to Girls Talk Books. Really quick, I just want to let you know if you have an amazing book you want to share, visit Girls Talk Books and in our contact section, sign up to be on our show. Or if you want to write your own book, I've helped hundreds of authors create books. I can help you with that too. Visit girlstalkbooks.com to learn more. Thanks again for tuning in. So, Eva, thank you for joining us on Girls Talk Books. This is great. Congratulations on your new book. And I see that you have several books out. So we're going to get right into that. But before we get into it, we always have to start talking about what we read as a child. What were the books that influenced us? What were some, what was our reading like? Or, was reading even in your home? So tell us a little bit about you and reading and growing up and how that impacted your life.
Okay, well, as a little girl, I remember reading stories about Harriet Tubman. In
Mm.
second grade, I even won an award for a poem I wrote about her. I don't remember the words, but I'll never forget how proud I felt. Growing up, most of the books we were given in school were by white authors, like Judy Blume or the English literature standards. So later I fell in love with Elizabeth Barrett Browning's How Do I Love Thee? I thought that was like magnificent work. And then, but what really changed me was when African American stories started to become more available. Finally, I could see families and children who looked like me. They gave me permission to imagine my own story on the page.
So what was that like for you? Like, what was one of the first stories that really caught your eye that says, "Wow, these people look like me"?
Well, I'm gonna tell you one story that I read from cover to cover, and I'm ashamed to say this. I'm so ashamed to say this. I read this. This was the first time I read a book from cover to cover, as opposed to reading for comprehension just to find the information to put on a
Mhm.
test or answer a question for school. The first time I read a book from cover to cover that I really recall was
Mhm.
probably around the time I met you.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
And that was Terry McMillan, Disappearing Acts.
Mm.
That was the first time I picked up a book and I actually like engaged in it so much that I began to feel like a loss when I finished the book. Like, wow, that adventure ended, you
Mm.
know. That was the first time. And then I began to touch Toni Morrison and I read some other people that were out. I can't recall their names offhand, but of
Mhm.
course, Iyanla Van Zant and, I remember Yolanda sent me a book about Iyanla Van Zant one time. It was called Peace from Broken Pieces. And I saw myself and my challenges as a woman, as a mother, in that. But I think the most profound reading that I had was as an adult, not as a child.
And that's interesting because sometimes we connect with books that either take us someplace where we want to go or it resonates with us. And you, like you said, as a child, you didn't see those books that resonated with you. And it wasn't until you were an adult that Terry McMillan and Toni Morrison and all those stories were relating to you as an adult. And I think that's so powerful because, we didn't grow up with a lot of books in our house. I had a lot of books, but our family as a whole didn't have like a bookshelf. I did. My mother would buy me books, but it wasn't like, "Oh, this is our family bookshelf."
Mhm.
I have my books under the bed in a box or whatever. And you're right, when you get older, then your reading is gonna change because now you're looking for something else that you can relate to. And it's powerful that just because we didn't read as youth doesn't mean that we can't start reading as adults.
Yes, definitely.
And so tell us a little bit about where you grew up, what was your childhood like, outside of reading?
My childhood was, I didn't have a childhood. That's how my childhood was. Um,
Mm,
I grew up carrying a lot of experiences that children shouldn't have to carry. For a long time, silence felt like survival. But eventually, I realized that silence was also keeping me from healing. That's when storytelling became my way forward. My childhood was, my childhood was really different, and not different in as opposed to, like, other women that were coming up in same similar situations, but it was different compared to, like, Yolanda. I found a comfort with Yolanda that didn't resonate in my household, in my family, you know?
mm,
Um, there was stability in that friendship, you know what I mean? There was no stability coming up. It was
mhm,
very unstable, and, my mother was an addict, and I am a survivor of childhood sexual molestation.
mm.
And,
Sorry.
and our family I feel Imma tell you, I wouldn't trade nothing for my journey today. My journey has brought me here. No, I don't wish it on anybody, but I think that it has made me so much stronger. My childhood taught me how to be transactional as opposed to, um, giving and receiving from a loving space or from a normal space. It was
Mhm,
I was I was coded into believing that
mm,
I should use what I got to get what I want. And
mm,
and I remember even having conversations in college with Yolanda as we were roommates, and she would tell me, "But you're missing out on things," because I really thought that way of thinking was right.
mm,
You know?
mm,
Um, I had to um I had to relearn everything. So books also helped me relearn everything. Everything from reading Essence magazine, Ayana Van Ayana Van Zandt, reading those book inserts that used to appear in Essence magazine every month from new authors. Uh,
mhm,
that's how I became familiar with Ayana. That's how I became familiar with a sister named Debrina Gandy. I believe her name is Debrina Gandy. She has a book called Sacred Pampering Principles. Those types of books taught me how to be a young woman, to be a woman. And even Monique Greenwood, she wrote a book, but I was an adult then in my 30s, but she even wrote a book where it taught you about getting your passport, putting your affairs in order. So I sought that type of literature, and then more and more self-help literature.
and that's interesting because, like you said, growing up, you had those childhood, traumas as we would, maybe label them,
Mhm.
and you didn't have anybody to give you directions and lead you to certain places, so books were your mentors, like, those are the people who were in your life telling you things that maybe family members should have been telling you, but they weren't, or they didn't have the capacity of they didn't know
The
themselves.
capacity. Yeah, I believe that. That's the place where I look at it from. I look at it from they did not have the capacity, they did not have the information, and therefore they didn't know how to give it because they didn't know how to give it to themselves, you know?
Exactly. Exactly, and so we talk about Yolanda. Yolanda's our shared girlfriend. I knew Yolanda growing up since elementary school,
Mm,
and then you met her in college. You guys were at Central State
correct,
University, I believe.
correct. Mhm.
Yeah. So what'd you major in college, and how did that get you to the path of where you are today in your work and as an author?
I majored in social work, and I became a therapist. Uh
Now, was that? Well, you think that was because? Why do you think you went into that field? Why do you
I'll
think that?
tell you initially, let me tell you something. When I was younger, I was under the influence that social workers were rich because of the social worker at my school. I always thought she was rich. She was a
Or
ve
why do you think that? What was it about her you made that
You
made
know
you
what
think
I
that?
really believe? I believe it was because she was a white woman, and her clothes were neat. Now that I look back on it, her clothes were neat. and she was consistent, so I thought she was rich. You know what I mean? But, looking back on it now, I realize she didn't look rich back then, you know what I'm saying? But she knew how to, put one foot in front of the other and show up to work every day, you know what I mean? But in my mind as a child, that consistency,
Mm,
but you know what? When you really reflect on it, consistency is a form of wealth, It
mm.
is.
Push that. What do you mean? What some let me see
It's
what you're
a form
thinking.
of wealth because it takes a lot of, grounding and a lot of resilience to understand, you have to be consistent in order to achieve your goals, and you have to really be focused, and that is wealth in and of itself, you know what I'm saying? To be focused enough to have a laser beam focus to achieve a goal. That's wealth.
Yeah, that's true because if you know millionaires, they don't get wealthy by just laying around all day doing nothing. They have to get up, make that money, look at those stock numbers, whatever they have to do investing, and they are being consistent because they know how to get the money and how to continue to get it. And if you slack off at
Mhm.
any point, yeah, I get it. I love that. I love that.
Mhm.
So you went into social work thinking that would make you rich, and then when you realized that wasn't true, what made you stay in it? Like, what was the hook that kept you involved?
I think what made me stay in it was the fact that when I got to college and at Central State actually, and I began to sit in those classes, I realized that I was an empath. I didn't really know that that was the name to call it at that particular time, but what I understood was, hey, I know what these terms mean that they're teaching me.
Mm,
I understand that because I've seen that behavior and I've always been observant because that's due to, being a child of trauma, you're always hyper vigilant. So I was always aware of my surroundings, no matter where I went, whether it be at
mm,
home, whether it be walking to the grocery store, wherever I went, I was always aware of my surroundings. And that taught me how to assess the environments at all times. But I did not understand it. Although it gave me the hypervigilance, the ability to assess, that even needed to have some moderation. You know, the hypervigilance can keep you on edge if you're not careful. And so you have to
mm,
have some balance in that. You have to be able to ground yourself and learn how to relax and turn it off and just be aware, I mean, in your awareness, just be still, you know,
mm,
because if you're always on guard, you don't have a time to relax and be
mm.
still and receive. Just receive the unfolding as opposed to expecting something, you know, to fall out of the sky or like people say, the next shoe to fall.
So tell us a little bit now. Let's get through from college to your professional life and then becoming an author. So give us that path.
Okay, so I became a psychotherapist. I became a psychotherapist after graduate school. I went to Clark Atlanta University and I began to work for a psychiatrist. I became his assistant. And I believe that that's where my path of really understanding how to utilize understanding the stories of others to help
Mm,
them heal and get through to the next place or to be able to make connections in their mind as to how this behavior connected to that behavior and this is why we are here and what can we do uh to break that cycle. What can we do differently? How can we change our behaviors using like skills like CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, and DBT, dialectical behavior therapy? Like just teaching them, well, if I'm in the process of changing the way I think, what am I replacing it with? And then also, if I'm in the process of changing a behavior, but I become overwhelmed, what do I do? How do I ground myself? How do I take care of myself in the moment so that I can get to the other side? So once I learned how to do that, I began to embrace it, in teaching others. And but the thing is, corporate America it just began to feel like I had to do too much code switching, and that made me uncomfortable.
Mm,
It made me uncomfortable because, like, I'm a darker skinned woman, and sometimes I'm the only African American in the room, but because of the shade of my skin, people, they're not trusting of me at all just
mm,
because of my skin color. And it shows up in how they try to micromanage me, or they try to guard information from me as a,
mm,
like, maybe they shouldn't share certain things with me that maybe they may share with some of my counterparts. And when I start picking, or even just the fact that they were uncomfortable at times when I would show up in certain spaces, um, like, a Caucasian woman can sit in a room and be confident and be polite and respectful, but confident, and she won't be destroyed or diminished unless they're being catty. But a black woman should be more like, your voice should have a higher pitch, like,
mm,
"Hey, how you doing? Everybody okay?" And it's just not me. Sometimes
mm,
I don't even wanna speak. Sometimes I can speak and say hello, but maybe I wanna reserve my voice, you know,
mm,
until it's a moment where I feel like it's appropriate to speak. And then sometimes when I'm speaking, people are just uncomfortable with me, or they're just, like, cautious of what is she thinking at all times, you know? So it's really,
mm,
it's a strain, and I think that that is a form of trauma itself to African American
mm.
women.
Looking back, at your story, your childhood, trauma, becoming a is it psychologist or psych? I don't like to
It's
get people
psychotherapist. Mhm,
psychotherapist,
mhm.
and growing up, looking back now at your life, have you seen kids that had similar situations to you growing up and that you've been able to approach them a different way? Or have you been able to look back even on yourself and heal? Like, tell me a little bit about your journey now that you are in this field and you have some books out that we'll talk about, but how has being in this field healed you or helped you heal others?
It has healed me in a lot of ways because I tell people I'm a therapist with a therapist. So
Mm,
I could not embark on this journey fully without having a place where I could check in.
mm,
And I had to check in because there are times when you see yourself going through something. We have a term called countertransference, when you see yourself in the client.
mm,
And so, how do you manage that, without working out your own stuff within the client, but guiding them through to work out what they need to work out for themselves, as opposed to you processing your own stuff. So you have to have a safe space where you talk about countertransference,
mm,
because sometimes it may show up. But even when I'm not in a therapy session, I can run across people who I see myself in, like
mm,
younger women who don't know how to love themselves. I can see the Eva who didn't know how to love herself as a younger woman. I can see the Eva as a little girl who was molested, but who was the little girl that everybody's parent didn't want them to have anything to do with because they felt like I was too grown. I was too grown because I was introduced to grown folks things. You know what I mean?
mm,
So I was the little girl that I remember. I lived in the projects at the time, and there was a little girl's aunt who was having a birthday party for her cousins, and all of the parents in the neighborhood who were the parents of my friends, they had to talk the auntie into allowing me to come to the party. Mind you, this woman had never had an interaction with me. But
mm,
they had to allow the auntie to, they had to talk to her and let her know, you cannot have a party and not let Eva come to the party.
mm,
And now nobody had a conversation with my family or my parents, but this was a conversation. And and the only reason why I know, because my friends told me. My
Mm.
mother told them that they had to allow you to come to the party. Their parents would not allow, because their parents were more stable in their thinking, and they understood, and this is something that I've understood as a parent. If I just allow that child around my children, I can teach that child through how I take care of my children, as well as be able to take care of them in that space so that they can
Mm.
feel what I'm giving to my children, how I love them, how I encourage them, how I empower them. I can give that to that child as well. And that may make a difference, a major difference in that child's life, you know?
Hi, I'm Sonia Hollins, and thanks for tuning in to Girls Talk Books. Really quick, I just want to let you know if you have an amazing book you want to share, visit Girls Talk Books and in our contact section, sign up to be on our show. Or if you want to write your own book, I've helped hundreds of authors create books. I can help you with that too. Visit girlstalkbooks.com to learn more. Thanks again for tuning in. Do you think that made a difference for you by going
I
to that
know, I
party?
know it did. I know it did to a large degree because, it's like I grew up and I always knew I didn't belong in the family that I was born into. Like I always knew, hey, this is not where you're supposed to be. You're supposed to be somewhere else. This is not the nurturing you need. This is, TD Jakes says as well. TD Jakes says we are 10-gallon people born into pint-sized families.
Mm,
And pint-sized people only know how to give you pint-sized love because that's all they got.
mm,
And even though it's not enough for us, we need to be filled up, but that's all they have to give. So because that's all they have to give, it becomes your responsibility to find other ways to pour into yourself, to find other vessels that pour into you. Uh,
mm,
Someone else said it, I think it was Oprah. She said, it doesn't matter what your mama did or your daddy didn't do. You have the power to step into a brand new day and change your life. That's who I am. So
and
that information just it aligned with who I was, and it aligned with my journey. And it's amazing because you can go through a journey and not know what's going on. But that's what was going on when
mm,
I met Yolanda. That's what was going on when Yolanda took me home to her family for Christmas, and everybody gave me a gift. They were pouring into me, giving me something that from my pint-sized family perspective could not offer me at that particular time, but they were pouring it into me, building me up, telling me, I see you, you're valid, you're worthy. And I'm grateful for all those moments. I always tell people, yes, I have a parent, but God always provided me nurturing and mothering from other places at times when I
mm,
really needed it. So I never close my mind to who is the vessel that God is using it before me today. And I always
mm,
have to remind myself, what vessel, what type of vessel will you be to someone else's life in this
mm.
moment? You know?
Girl, you preaching up in here. I mean, that is so deep, and so let's transition that into your book. So tell us now how you've learned these life lessons. You'll come into grips with yourself. You know you need therapy as a psychotherapist as well, and you've written books. Tell us about those books and why you wrote those and why you feel they are important.
The first book I wrote was Bootleg Heart. Bootleg Heart was built out of exhaustion. When I approached it with a full laser beam focus, it was due to exhaustion because I had been trying to do everything from being a therapist to, just living my life as a woman, as a mother. Um,
Mm,
I've been a wife before, I'm divorced now, but just reflecting, I had an empty nest and the voice in my head became louder. Now, since I was a little kid, people told me I should write a book. Since I was a little kid, people saw the value of my storytelling. But what I didn't recognize was I had gone through so many different things in life, and now the weight of it all was just
mm,
too heavy to carry. And I felt like this. I said, "You know what? I'm not I'm not achieving what I want to achieve as a psychotherapist in this particular area. I'm not as successful as I'd like to be. I'd like to be able to reach a broader audience. I'd like
Mm,
to be able to reach specifically a niche of people who identify with me, who identify with my journey, because I know that they need help. I needed it. So I still need it. We are always in the process of becoming. We never arrive. So
sure.
I'm always looking for a source that can I can feed into or that I can eat from as far as like taking in information to improve myself. So I was like, I know if I'm going through this, then other people are going through this as well. I need to be able to help them in somehow, you know? And that's something amazing because like, I got to a point where I was like, I need to turn my trauma into a superpower. I need to become um alchemized by what I've been through. I need to be able to say, hey, you know, I've been through this. I can show you the way if you just hold my hand. Trust me, we can get to the other side of this. I know that it looks dark, but I see the light. I know where it is. Just hold my hand and we can get through. And that was the approach that I did in therapy. But then I started saying, you need to share that with everyone that you
Mm,
encounter. And when you see an opportunity in their lives to be of help, to be of service, you need to
mm,
do that. So that's what I started doing. And I began to feel burnt out though with private practice, with wanting people wanting to see me but not hear me,
mm,
to have me as a face of their organization as we have quote unquote African Americans that work here. However, just in case you want that, but then wanting to silence me because maybe they may not like, people may be uncomfortable with my directness or my honest. I always tell my clients, I call a thing a thing. So, if at any point you feel uncomfortable with my directness and bedside manner, please let me know. I'll help you find another therapist because it's important for me that you get the healing that you need, that you get the help
mm,
that you need, as opposed to me making money off of you. I don't want to hold you if you're not healing, if you're not gaining the information that I'm trying to give you. And
mm,
that was just so important for me to do because I started recognizing that certain groups of people, they wanted to say, yeah, I have a therapist, but they wanted to tell help how to help them. And sometimes we just have to be open to help has new information. And I just don't personally do well with sitting and listening in therapy. I'm a very engaging therapist and I like to teach. I like to give information. So, and I give homework assignments. I'm like, okay, this is your homework. And so when I see you again, I expect that you have done these steps or taken these steps or completed this homework that I asked you to do. And hopefully, that they follow through. But if they don't follow through, I hold them accountable to that. Some people don't want to be held accountable. They just want to spend their money because they say, I have a therapist, or I'm doing it because the court ordered me to do it. And I know that if I do this, the court will see me in a light, in a better light if I've gone to therapy. So
So where did the name bootleg come from though? That's an interesting title. What is that
So let me
referring
tell
to?
you about bootleg. So as I was brainstorming how to write this book and I started talking about my background, my father's background, my mother's background, I started talking about a grandmother that I never met.
Mm,
Her name was Lillian Marie Robinson. And Miss Lillian was born in Natchez, Mississippi. And they call that the Devil's Punch Bowl because
mm,
that's where they sent a lot of people who right during Reconstruction, they sent a lot of people there and they kind of deprived them from a lot of resources and the land was bare. So a lot of people died, a lot of people suffered in a particular area. But that's where my grandmother was from. And so she moved to, I don't know exactly when she met my grandfather, but she moved to a city in Mississippi called Laurel, Mississippi. My grandmother became a bootlegger. And
Mm,
she was a black woman during that particular time who uh, who had more than a lot of women, black or white, you know what I'm saying? Because she had become a bootlegger. So she took care of her family. Even my grandfather was probably more of her employee as opposed to, you know what I'm saying, being the person that was in charge. Uh, so she ran a bootleg operation. And as I reflected on that and I talked about that, thought about the resilience that it
mm,
took to not only come from Natchez, Mississippi, and to be born and raised in that environment, but then to go into Laurel, Mississippi, and become a bootlegger, become a black woman with her own juke joint, with her own jukebox and her mink coat, and her children dressed and clean and looking neat, and her husband dressed up, clean and looking neat. And I said, and I only have a photo of her. And I
mm.
said, yep, I can relate to who she is, you know?
Wow.
So
You have a photo of her in the book? Is
I
a photo of her in
no, I should have put a photo of her in the book, but you know what? I see Bootleg Heart as an extension of a series of books because there were so many different stories. I could have a book on Yolanda and I Adventures in Central State alone. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I see that as a possibility, you know, of branching off with that. That's my hope that I can branch off with
Mhm,
that book to, you know, broaden more stories. This was my first attempt at writing. So I didn't do it perfectly. I did it bootleg. I did it without any money. I did it. I went through KDP and I published it. Um, but you know, this was my first attempt and I only expect to get better at it. You know, I remember saying to someone, well, I'm so glad I completed that. That's off my to-do list. And they're like, no, this isn't it. You have to continue to write. So I
right.
began to have all these downloads, and so many other books have come about. I have written the book of Little Eva Teaches Good Touch, Bad Touch. That's a children's book of safety because when I was 4 years old, I was molested by a relative. So I wanted to teach the safety of that and a language that children can understand so that they can understand you can go tell somebody you don't have to carry this, it does not have to destroy you, you can still, you know, be empowered and be live a better life opposed to what you've been through. So I wrote that book and then my son has autism, so
Mm,
I wrote two books actually based upon his autism. I wrote Bryce's Brain is Brilliant, and I also wrote Bootleg Justice, A Parent's Guide to Surviving the IEP process.
mm.
So the Bootleg Justice I have on Gumroad, but the Bryce's Brain is Brilliant. It will be coming out October 19th on Amazon.
Yes, I love it, and so I gave you a little homework, once upon a time homework. Did you have a chance to do your homework?
I have my homework. I have my homework. I have my homework. Okay. So once upon a time, there was a little girl named Eva who wanted to feel safe and seen. One day she realized her voice was her freedom. Because of that, she began to write her truth until finally she became the author of Bootleg Heart, creating a legacy of healing for herself, her children, and anyone who has ever needed to know that they are not alone.
I love that. I love it. I love it. I'm so happy for you. I'm so happy for your journey. I'm so happy that you're helping other people get through their journeys as well because, looking back on us growing up, nobody talked about you didn't go see a counselor. I mean, you didn't do that. So now for you to be someone who looks like somebody who needs them, I think that's so powerful. I think that's so powerful. So,
Well, thank
congratulations on all
you.
you're doing. So tell us how we can get in touch with you, how we can follow you and learn more about your books and other things that you're doing. How can we do that?
Well, Bootleg Heart is going to be available on Amazon for purchase on September 19th for the paperback. But you can the auto the audio book is already available. The ebook is available, not the audio book, the ebook is available now on Amazon for pre-sale. Um, both the children's books are going to be they are up for pre-sale now on Amazon as well. Little Eva Teaches Good Touch, Bad Touch, and Bryce's Brain is Brilliant. They are up on for sale for pre-sale now on Amazon. However, they will be the final purchase date, go live date will be October 19th. And
What is October 19th? What does that date symbolize to you?
it actually doesn't symbolize anything major other than the fact that it was like 30 days after the
Okay,
initial go live for the publication of Bootleg Heart. So
gotcha.
I it was like I had all these books in my head all at once and I started trying to pull them out, but I was like, I need to make sure I'm focused on making sure Bootleg Heart is published first and that all the all the different things that I had, the kinks that I had to work out, I have them worked out. And I don't think that I have everything worked out, but I felt like, you know what? This is the portal. This book right here is the portal to becoming the person that you are becoming. You want to be an author, a speaker, a healer. And I also have the healing circle groups, and they're available too. You can sign up for those on my website at www.evaslide.com. You can sign up for the healing circle groups. I do a blog there too. I the 19th was that I just had to get all of that out first. I had to make sure that that was published. And then if I had some other things that I need to work out with the children's books, I could work those out, within those 30 days after that. So that's why.
Okay. I love it. I love it. Well, I'm glad we were able to connect. Yolanda and I and you, we are friends through her, and it's always powerful that you can have sister friends through other sister friends, even if you don't see each other a lot. When you talk and you connect, it's like it was like yesterday when we were together at that wedding. So I love it. I'm so excited for your journey. I'm so excited for your books and that I was able to use my platform to highlight, women and just people in publishing in general, to just help do what you do. And again, everyone, thanks for tuning in to Girls Talk Books. Check out Eva. We'll leave her information in the links so you can get her books. You can pre-order. You can order them if this is after that. But we want to thank you for joining us. And until next time, keep reading.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sonia Hollins, and thanks for tuning in to Girls Talk Books. Really quick, I just want to let you know if you have an amazing book you want to share, visit Girls Talk Books and in our contact section, sign up to be on our show. Or if you want to write your own book, I've helped hundreds of authors create books. I can help you with that too. Visit girlstalkbooks.com to learn more. Thanks again for tuning in.